Tom, an interesting morning, a lot going on, and we actually got a working outline of what this treaty could include and look like.
That's right, and that was significant. He had an earlier outline called the elements, but now they have a draft, a expanded chairman's draft of the elements. So we have the outline of the treaty now, and it's fairly extensive.
So when you say extensive, I think one of the things to start with is this whole concept of the talk of we need to define. Finally, they're saying, we need a definition, but the argument is whether it should be narrow or whether it should be broad.
Absolutely, and that is one of the more interesting things that happened today is certain countries, Mexico, the Netherlands, want a very broad definition that includes everything.
And we know what the reason is for that, is they can keep adding to it.
That's right, but also there is a movement now for exclusions from the treaty. And in the outline of the possible treaty, there is a provision for exclusions. Now, another paper on scope, which that means what's in the treaty. Another paper on scope specifically mentioned that certain countries want sporting firearms, recreational firearms, excluded from the treaty. So that is on the table now.
They use the word sporting, hunting rifles, and they also mentioned antique guns.
Yes, antique guns. That actually came out of the firearms protocol, and that is not near as sticky of an issue because you can define antique relatively easily.
Now, when you say the nation's pushing for this, they got it in here, we're talking about what, countries like Australia?
New Zealand has been particularly good on this issue. Other countries which I think would be supportive of it. I never want to speak for any country. I think Australia would be supportive of it.
The U.S.?
I think the U.S. would be supportive of that general concept. Again, I don't speak for the U.S., but the thing that's important is that is on the table. Now, how you define those things is going to be a significant task, but it is on the table.
Well, and I think, because I remember John Bolton years ago, he stood up there and he said, there is no definition for what you mean by small arms and light weapons. So this is closer to actually trying to do that. But at the same time, you've got that whole argument, and as you said, Mexico, pushing for a broad concept. And I thought it was interesting because there was a U.S. official yesterday who had an exchange with Mexico basically saying that, this treaty, and his words were very strong, is not a substitute for good government and good law enforcement.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that dialogue was an interesting dialogue. And there was the idea that some of the problems that Mexico faces are the result of
blaming our guns, though.
Yes, very much. But so that was an interesting exchange in diplomatic language.
But do you see that still as a sticking point? The whole idea of what is the definition?
Yes, I think that these things will be. Will go on and on and on. That's why we're going to be there until the bitter end. Maybe it won't be bitter. I don't know whether that be in 2012 or later. But they are making some progress, and it was nice to see an outline now. Now, how that outline is fleshed out, it will be another consideration. You've also got to realize that this is a trade treaty, and this treaty will have extensive provisions on trade, international trade. And we're not talking about the small arms and light weapons. We're talking about all major weapon systems with the exclusion of nuclear, biological, etc. So all conventional weapons will come under this trade treaty. So that's an incredible document to have drafted. And we're starting to see more participation by the military people. The United Kingdom's defense industry released a paper today, and it talked about how this is going to be a lot of hard work.
But they also, and that was interesting because in that paper, UK, just like the U.S. official, talked about how, we can make a laundry list up and we can put a wish list together, but sooner or later, push is going to come to shove, and we've got to decide what is really viable to be in this treaty.
Yeah, that's it, and those were good points to be made. And I think that
if you want a treaty, we got to figure out how we're going to get it done, not with everybody's wish list in there.
Well, the United Kingdom defense industry has been particularly interested in a treaty because they say what they want is a level playing field with other countries. Export regulations in the United Kingdom and the United States are very, very vigorous. unlike some other countries that don't quite have that type of export regulation for major military systems, and they would like to see the playing field level. That
Now,
has very little, if anything, to do with civilian firearms, which you're concerned with. But that's a major discussion point here in the arms trade treaty. You know.
and the industry has been here on
Yes,
that, very
yes.
concerned. Would they be happy with what they saw today, as far as the discussion as what could be? And we're talking the coulds and woulds and shoulds.
I couldn't speak for them, but I think they would be
Mm-hmm.
they would be happy to see it move along.
Mm-hmm. But the other big sticking point too is ammunition,
Oh well, that's
and it's still very much
yeah,
in
it's
there.
still very much in there, and the ammunition thing is very very hard because industry, all industry, and a lot, and the military people that know this issue keep saying categorically, you just can't do it. We have questions about it, political and substantive questions. But from just a pure practical standpoint, you can't have a international regulatory regime where you're trying to keep track of ammunition. Just can't be done.
Russia, I know you've talked about Russia several times, mentioned them as being opposed to this, mainly because of the trade issue.
Yes.
I know you can't speak for a country like
Yeah.
that, but again, do you think that the steps that are being made, that what you saw as and again, a loose outline,
Yeah.
would satisfy a lot of the concerns countries like Russia have and countries like the U.S. have as far as the
Oh,
industry go?
that's almost impossible question for me to answer,
Okay.
especially
And I only
vis-a-vis
brought it up because you often mention
vis-a-vis
Russia.
Russia. You know, Russia is a riddle wrapped up in an enigma.
Right.
But I think that people are glad to see an outline. You not only have Russia playing a fairly strong role, you have Pakistan. Pakistan continues to
And
take
Mexico, boy.
Mexico continue to take the floor time after time after time.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting in these that the presentations, as you've noticed, is that they have different style, but the Pakistanis love to go on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
When the U.S. speaks, it's always succinct and to the point.
And they were very much on the issue of the fact that we've got to, pick what we think is important to, and they really did stress that, the U.S. Official yesterday
Yes,
really
yes.
stressed about making sure we put in here what we can all agree upon, if that's the end result. But so often when I've talked to, John Bolton before, he has said, if they're really interested in going after the illicit trade, this treaty, there's other ways to do it.
Well,
And
you could start by enforcing
right.
your laws.
I
That
mean,
you
it's
already
illegal
have.
to begin with.
Yeah, people keep making that point. We've got to fight against illegal arms. Well, if they're illegal arms, you already have the means to fight against them. But don't get too logical on me on this.
No, but your feelings now, do you have a clearer picture of where we're going? Because the reason I asked you, they talk about the definition. Still no mention of self-defense. Still no exclusion on self-defense.
Well,
there may be exclusion
yeah.
on hunting
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sporting guns, but
Yeah.
no mention of self-defense.
Self-defense has not been mentioned, and that is a philosophical thing here at the United Nations, which I disagree with the United Nations on. Remember, the United Nations is a club of governments, and the psychology at the United Nations is just basically different than some of our psychologies. Remember, we're basically still a country of rebels.
Yeah, but
we don't like this.
What did you think of the
king
U.S.'s
stuff.
position on where they were standing? Did you feel?
I thought the U.S. has been taking some good, strong positions. I don't have any criticism of what I heard from the U.S. at this conference.
But as you said yesterday, self-defense is going to hang in there probably till the very end.
Yes, it will,
and then you're going to really have the fight.
Yeah, then you're going to have a fight. Yeah.
But and I would love to just have people, anyone who hasn't been to the UN, you sit in those meetings, day after day, hour after hour. Such generalities they speak in, round in circles so often. And if we didn't understand UN speak, it'd be hard to figure out anything that came out of that.
It would be, and I compare. I say to people, you get used to seeing on C-SPAN a congressional debate, or you'll go to your city council, or you go to your legislature, and the debate you'll see in a city council or a legislature or United States Senate or U.S. Congress is streamlined compared to the quote-unquote debate that you'll see in the UN. The UN moves at a glacial pace. There are no time limits on what people can say. There's no tradition of focusing what your statement is. There's also a tradition of very weak chairs in the sense that you'll never see, with the exception of NGOs, who they'll gavel down. But you'll never see a chair bring the gavel down to cut someone off who's speaking.
It
And
goes on and
you
on
you
and
you
on.
very much want to say at times, to scream at
Yeah,
times, what is your point? I know
exactly.
you love hearing yourself speak, but what is your point? I was there the other day, and I'll swear I timed one of the speeches. It was about 15 minutes, and at the end I thought he could have said it in 20 seconds.
Hmm. But I go back to this. I was so impressed with the U.S. official with Mexico because, there we had President Calderon in our Congress not too long ago getting a standing ovation about his call to reinstate the so-called assault weapons ban. And you had the representative from the U.S. making clear that the problem with the drug cartels in your country, in Mexico, are a law enforcement problem, not an international arms trade problem.
Amen.
And the treaty ain't the answer to your
Yeah, yeah,
problem. It's basically what he was saying.
yeah, that's right.
So, any word before I let you go on Rebecca and why she decided to leave?
The word is that IANSA had gotten much too far to the left, and that
Because of her.
because of her. And again, this is hearsay, but as we
Hearsay,
like to say in
but
the
chit
legal
chat.
world, good hearsay.
Hmm.
That the
Good
word, yeah,
sources.
good sources. The word is that that IANSA had gotten too far to the left, and the focus had become too much on her. Now,
And that's what we said from day one.
they
That's
won.
what we were
Now,
hearing.
this is good news or bad news. I think it's more good news than bad news. But I certainly hope that people aren't going to lower their guard.
Mm-mm.
Be,
IANSA is in there to
yeah, yeah,
stay.
Ants is in their stay, and they're for every there's right behind them. Their ranks are pretty deep, pretty deep.
And it'll be very interesting. That's what everybody's going to watch. They say 6 months before they name a replacement for Rebecca. That'll be
Yes,
very
yeah,
interesting to
yeah.
see. But before, again, I'll let you go. Your overall feeling from that outline that you saw discussed today.
Is that there's now we know a lot more about what the issues are and what's on the table.
But still, the fight over
There will
self-defense.
be a fight over self-defense.
Alrighty, thanks so
Okay,
much,
okay.
Tom.